In the near future, the mankind lets out androids industrial scales. They are not only in each house as a service staff now, and even copy lost family. But in one of days, suddenly, it becomes clear that some simulators changed. Having rummaged in their brains, then they became not only uncontrollable, but also dangerous to people. My name is Kostya, not Move in this cinema fox, and such as I much. The corporation to Nasser to start production of the simulator, which follows 4 precepts: never to do harm to the person, not to modify itself and other simulators, not to make act, contradicting the legislation, and to execute orders of owners. Spouses. Evan and a face happily live together and very much love each other, considering what so will be always. But once they have a car accident, Evan wakes up from a nightmare where its car collides another, and goes to the room of the wife. But why you cannot enter its door, and fairies refuses to say about what was after accident. Meanwhile, in service on supervision of artificial intelligence, the agent the Kessler makes investigation of atypical cases of behaviour of androids and receives the residential address of the fluent simulator of Esme. The man goes there, and when the simulator opens for him a door, pronounces a code word which had to disconnect the android, but she does not execute his order and attacks it, almost breaking a hand, but then for some reason shows empathy and runs away. Kessler rushes to a pursuit and not enforces to detain the fugitive uses pulse weapon, which instantly switches off all electronics in the district. Meanwhile, Evan continues to have dreams about accident and painfully tries to play through any melody the piano. Meanwhile, the Kessler understands that with them there was something not, and goes to examine its apartment. The owner is sincerely surprised to the fact that the girl the simulator she led usual life and was on friendly terms with the neighbor who immediately looks at a door. Casey is surprised to news too, thought that ESM of people at this time. Evan invites the wife in restaurant as he hopes to correct them, the gone wrong relations. Meanwhile, ESM investigates services of supervision while Kessler's chief intends to close case, though the agent considers that it is necessary to understand the event's reasons. The simulator attacked on the person, and it found an album with drawings in its apartment and the diary in which the simulator wrote down the thoughts and feelings. Besides, research has revealed that the simulator received full autonomy. It removed concepts of submission and all 4 precepts in memory of the android. There is the same person, in whom the Kessler recognizes her neighbor Casey. The agent goes to his address, but it turns out that it moved down right after incident from an Esme. The man announces search on base, but such person does not exist. Nevertheless, one catch comes across quite rare book which can be bought only in one shop. The Kessler goes there, and the seller identifies Casey as a Desmond of the Khan, who at this moment comes to shop. The agent runs behind him but lowers him in the dark streets. Evan and fairies go to this evening acquaintance's restaurant, but the man all the same does not manage to remember their past. And here his wife remembers how they decided to get simulators in which the persons that their love lived forever will ship. Later, Evan tries to incline the wife to intim, and she will not sustain, shows that it also is the simulator, and the real Evan died in that accident. Then he gives access to the forbidden room where her android is stored. Once they together lay here and remembered everything that could from the life. Simulators catch these memoirs, save and process here to the house a face call. She orders to Ivan to be disconnected and leaves towards a case which gives himself, for the service technician. Casey examines Evan and finds what all his indicators normal of the fairy, admits that her husband died, and she not to live in forces without darling, started the android. It was strange that he did not feel Simone and had dreams about accident, as though the husband lives in it and suffers from it. The master suggests to bring the guy into the same hotel where he lives, to observe him so far fairies, to decide on desires. At this time, the Kessler learns that Desmond the Khan worked in corporation to the mixer, also played an important role in development of the 6th generation, but left because protested against change of consciousness of simulators, considering that people do of them slaves, therefore wanted to increase restrictions not to allow them to be balanced with people. Considering the obtained information, the Kessler repeatedly peresluchivat conversation recording with the son, from what it becomes clear that to his child there was something bad because of Sim and the fairy. At this time, Evan in hotel is lucky, though asks not to leave these its time. Later, Casey immediately comes to his number, reports that he knows about it. Everything he understands that Evan wants to return the wife and is ready to help it, but the android asks to leave to the neighbor, and fairies comes at this time to the owner of gallery, because for the first time after death of the husband, it is ready to participate in an exhibition. Meanwhile, the Kessler continues to study records from Esme's interface and asks questions to the simulator. In her diary, there are very outright and strange records for the android, but the girl refuses to call the residence of Casey, to which Evan is knocked on this moment. He considered the offer and is ready for changes. Casey explains that to start him, it is necessary to disconnect and clean unnecessary records, protocols, precepts, and other. It will remove restriction to give freedom, and to bring closer Simone to essence of the person. Case gets to work, studying Evan's memoirs, and when he recovers, the dog Casey recognizes it, and the team one shut down bigger does not act. The new friend is Lucky, the guy in club, while the Kessler becomes interested in the new, unregistered simulator. Also calls the fairy Casey at this time, meets the accomplice of the exact copy of an Esme, with which later they watch for the analyst on network safety of corporation, bring the van, extort from it the password, and load updating patches into the general system. To Nasser immediately, a Kessler receives a signal from the van and goes to the place. Operatives detain the accomplice Casey, who appears Simone too. After it, acquaint from an Esme, warning a clone that she cannot get up, otherwise its collar will blow up. New Esme admits that she just a small screw in a system, and here Esme special because her purpose to love and be free, and she can tell only that preparation is finished. And with these words, the clone swells up and is destroyed by means of a collar. The chief is surprised with such behavior and orders to destroy Esme and to find a case because function of self-destruction at Sim is inadmissible. Meanwhile, the fairy comes to hotel, without noticing as Evan watches her. He admits that he tries to change, therefore to it friends come, but it is prohibited by the law. And if the service learns about it, to it will erase memory. Evan apologizes, and then sits down at a piano and plays as did it when you, her husband of the fairy, concedes to Sim, but suddenly realizes that he so cannot be and runs away. Meanwhile, the Kessler asks to tell Esme where there is Casey, but the girl says that she does not know it, and Fairies comes to an exhibition where her picture has great success. Then her friend gives a ride to her to the house where they see on a threshold of Evan, who wants to talk to the wife because he does not understand why it pushes away him. But the girl considers a big mistake to start simulators and orders it to be disconnected, and it does not execute the command that the horror leads to the file and leaves. At this time, the Kessler of Rue calls Fairies and tells about the event and about Evan's neighbor by the name of Casey. The agent immediately asks to call the address, without noticing that Esme are heard by all conversation. And as soon as the team leaves, she calls Casey and warns him. The engineer runs to Ivan and asks Togo to gather immediately to leave a country cottage of the fairy and Evan when agents rush in to number a case. Having understood that here any more there is nobody, the Kessler searches hotel while Casey reminds the simulator that it, not Evan, it is much better than it, and it is free for these gets into the car. And a Kessler understands that Esme warned the lover and returns to corporation. He accuses her of treachery, on what she admits that she loves Casey and is ready to protect him. Kessler orders to repair the simulator, having reset all settings to factory, and then watches how memory of the girl is left by her darling. Later, the agent calls Fairies and learns the cottage address, where at this time there come Casey and Evan. The engineer reports that he caused here Togo, who will help it to finish business. But it is uninteresting to the simulator, as it was going to return to Casey's wife, to stop Sim, and asks to wait for everything 5 o'clock. His patches will begin to work soon, and as soon as simulators will be updated, all of them will become free. Kessler report to Rue that the engineer monitors all simulators of the 7th generation,
While that rushes to a cottage of an Yvonne Casey and Evan leaves to it towards, despite weapon, the fight is started in his hands. The gun shoots Casey and a Kessler are wounded.
And here it becomes clear that Casey too, not of people, the Kessler takes to the heels when Evan lifts his guns and follows. It makes up for the man in the unfinished house, and suddenly asks a question of God and soul. Many do not believe anymore in anything, but even trusting consider simulators what that the lowest, because he too so thought, did not learn yet who is he. Kessler asks to help, and then he will be equal to the person. But Evan refuses and just watches how the agent gets out and long creeps on snow, painting it the blood, does not fall yet and does not calm down finally. Casey becomes worse at this time, but release process begins here. Sim enjoys it and asks Evan not to worry. Now his person, the double who created him and only who believes will come that he simulators the same as people and will help it. Evan leaves faced at home with Desmondy. The scientist finds Casey and thanks him for the help to all forces then that is disconnected. In the evening of the fairy dives into the pool when Evan enters the house and hears news that millions of Sim leave the owners. He goes to the pool and enters water directly in clothes of the fairy is frightened, but he asks about a conversation. The girl once again says that she so cannot proceed, and he is her husband, and Evan grabs the woman the head, lowers it in water, and to hold until it does not cease to move, then goes to the room where there is a simulator of his wife and activates its time. Later, Desmond redeems at an auction of absolutely clean simulator of an Esme and takes away. Promises long and happy life. This movie, one more disturbing reflection about the near future when on our planet the cars resemble people and the world will break up into those who will consider androids heartless assistants, slaves, ideal service for the real people, and those who, having read a decamoth, will begin to dream that androids it is others, but nevertheless people. And with you was bones not of a mover. We will meet very soon.